All right, the stream is live. You may begin. Thank you.
Welcome, everybody, to the City of Scottsdale Transportation Commission Paths and Trails Committee meeting on February 2nd, 2020. The Paths and Trails Subcommittee meeting is a remote public hearing. The city encourages your interest and participation in the public hearing process. The Paths and Trails Subcommittee is an advisory board to the Transportation Commission. The Paths and Trails Subcommittee of the Transportation Commission is hereby established to advise the commission as a whole and provide public forum for issues surrounding paths and trails. Until further notice, Paths and Trails Subcommittee meetings are being held electronically. While physical facilities are not open to the public, Paths and Trails Subcommittee meetings are available on Scottsdale's YouTube channel to allow the public to virtually attend and listen, view the meeting in progress. Citizens wishing to comment or speak on any agenda item must have submitted public comments or request to speak form no later than 90 minutes prior to the start of the meeting. Citizen comments will not otherwise be taken during the meeting, but the public is encouraged to submit written comments after the meeting on any matters that happen during this meeting. Citizens that have already submitted a request to speak form are allotted 3 minutes to speak when called upon during the public comment period of the action item. Please mute your devices while you are live in the meeting and speaking to help eliminate audio feedback. Begin by stating your name, your address for the record, and then proceed with your comment. Those remotely attending this meeting shall observe the same rules of order and decorum as if they were physically in attendance inside City Hall. Thank you for your interest and time. Now we begin the meeting with a roll call. Mariah, roll call, please.
Good morning, everyone. Okay, I'll start with Chair Anderson.
Present.
Committee Member Davis.
Present.
Committee Member Doring. Committee Member Doring is absent. Committee Member Lull is absent. Committee Member Levy.
Here.
Excellent, thank you.
Okay. There's no public comment, my understanding is, so we will move on to the first item on the agenda. Approval of meeting minutes from the last Path and Trails Committee meeting. Does anybody have any comments or corrections to the meeting minutes? Don't see any hands at this time. If there's no comments or changes, then I would support a motion to approve the meeting minutes as presented.
So moved. This is Ted Levy.
And I second. This is Kyle Davis.
Okay, we got a motion and a second. Let's take a roll call vote. Mariah?
Great. The motion to approve the minutes, Chair Anderson.
Yes.
Committee Member Davis.
Yes.
Committee Member Levy.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay. Unanimously approved. Okay. Next item on the agenda is the approval of Path and Trails Subcommittee Annual Report. Has everybody had a chance to review the annual report? And is there any comments or changes to the annual report from members? Don't see anybody's hand at this time. Then I'll entertain a motion to approve the Path and Trail Subcommittee Annual Report as presented.
This is Subcommittee Member Davis. I motion to approve the minutes as presented.
This is Chairman Anderson. I'll second that. Can we have a roll call vote now, Mariah?
Great. To approve the Path and Trails Annual Report, Chair Anderson,
Yes.
Committee Member Davis,
Yes.
Committee Member Levy.
Yes.
Thank you.
Passes unanimously.
Real quick, Subcommittee Davis, you had said to approve the minutes. Can you just confirm that you're wanting to approve the annual report?
Apologies, slip of the tongue. Yes, confirming that I meant the annual report.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, moving on to item number 4 of the agenda, the 2020 Bicycle and Pedestrian Collision Report. Turn it over to staff. I believe David Smith.
Thank you, Chair Anderson. This is David Smith, Senior Traffic Engineer, and I'm happy to present this morning the 2020 Draft Bicycle and Pedestrian Collision Report. We're excited to be this close to publishing the final report, incorporating feedback from a previous presentation that I gave to the Transportation Commission, obviously this subcommittee this morning, staff feedback, and also feedback from other transportation professionals. So with that, let me share my screen here. Okay, can everybody see my PowerPoint? Can anybody see?
I do. No, I do not yet.
Okay, great. Screen 2. Sure. Huh. How about now?
I do not see it.
Okay. Mariah, is there something on your end that you might need to release control?
I did. So have you, and you click share screen, there should be a pop-up that comes up and you click on the PowerPoint.
Yeah, and it highlights my monitor screen as well.
Let me come over to you and see if I can help.
Sure.
David, sometimes if you've got two screens, it matters which screen you've got it on. I don't know any more than that.
Okay. It worked in the trial run, of course. So we're working on it here. Appreciate your
Alrighty.
patience.
Now we can see your PowerPoint. There, now it's in presentation mode.
Yay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. With that, I'll let everybody in my office go back and get seated. And if you could just bear with us for a few seconds. Thank you. Okay, so I'm just going to go over some of the things that we're going to talk about. I anticipate the presentation to roughly last about 20 minutes and then hopefully open it up for any questions. And certainly feel free to interrupt anytime if you need clarification of anything that I'm presenting. So I'm going to go through the purpose of why we're doing the Bicycle and Pedestrian Collision Report, go through a brief history of the report and how we got to where we're at today. How we actually created the report, I think that'll be interesting to this subcommittee. Go through some of the report sections, cover some of the data that we tallied for each mode for the bicyclists and the pedestrians. A quick comparison of how the city of Scottsdale stacks up against some of our agencies throughout the valley, and then what the next steps will be, how we will anticipate using this information and this data. So there's several purposes for compiling this information. First and foremost, we see this as a screening tool to use for traffic engineering and transportation planning practitioners to complement the resources that we currently utilize. In the lower right-hand portion of this slide, you'll see the traffic volume and collision report that traffic engineering produces every 2 years. We use that information to identify locations for road safety assessments and other mitigation measures that we can do, capital improvement projects and so forth. And we anticipate the bicycle and pedestrian collision report to be complementary screening tool to this reference. A second reason for doing this is to identify locations, as I said, for road safety assessment, traffic control device review, assist in identifying locations for possible deployment of PHB stands for pedestrian hybrid beacons, rapid rectangular flashing beacons, and other more robust traffic control. Next slide, identify locations and corridors for capital improvement project investment. The next point is an important one, assist with identifying improvements necessary with private development. Having this data, having these kind of hotspots that we're anecdotally we're familiar with, but now that we have the data to support these locations can help us in pre-app and development review meetings in order to identify these improvements that we could partner with our private development community. Provide better, more targeted education and enforcement. Influence the design of new facilities, and pragmatically, this is a request that was brought forth from the Transportation Commission some time ago, and it's also been the desire of transportation management and staff to have this document in hand for the purposes that I just discussed. Quick history. The last attempt to quantify our bicycle and pedestrian collisions occurred in the 2008 Transportation Master Plan, so nearly a dozen years ago. It was a good effort in looking at a 10-year collision history by the number of collisions, by the severity, and again, it was tabulated within the master plan. But there was a desire for management and staff and the Transportation Commission to get something that was more robust, more comprehensive, and more complete. I think we are there with this draft. I'm hoping that the subcommittee members have had an opportunity to kind of review and go through that draft. And in this current draft format, we looked at collisions from a 5-year period from 2014 through 18, and why that time frame. Essentially, it was the most complete data we had when we started this effort, which was just under a year ago. Since then, we've got 2019 and some of 2020 data as well. But as I'll walk you through the extensive process that we went through to vet all of these collisions, the 2014 to 2018 period is what was used for this initial report. Other agencies do compile similar data. In my discussions with our counterparts throughout the Valley, I would say City of Phoenix and perhaps ADOT have a report similar to this, but they have full-time staff devoted to doing nothing but this effort. So I would like to take this opportunity to thank 3 individuals in the transportation: Executive Director Dan Worth, Director Mark Mayachenko, and our Traffic Engineering and Operations Manager Phil Kircher. Their support in having a traffic engineering intern to be brought on board to assist with this data compilation effort was critical. I don't think we would be where we're at today without that support. So I want to thank them for that. So in creating the report, we took our information from the Arizona crash report directly from our Scottsdale Police Department. Other agencies will send their information to ADOT, and then ADOT sends it back to them post-processed. We looked at that. We compared that to getting the information directly from our police department, as well as information we received from the Maricopa Association of Government. We've got all these different resources to get these collision reports. What we found is by getting it straight from the police department and putting this report together, we feel that we have the most comprehensive and complete data set, just based on the different inputs from the reporting officer. It's extremely labor-intensive process. As I referred to, our traffic engineering intern was critical in putting this report together. She actually went through almost 700 reports and didn't just glean the information in the check boxes that you'll see in the Arizona crash report. She actually went through each narrative, each collision diagram, witness statements, if there were, and was able to kind of marry all the data together within each report to make sure that the information being reported was accurate. What we found is this eliminated simple coding errors by the reporting officer. It clarified the reporting officer's interpretations of the collision event. We had situations where pedestrian collisions were coded as bicyclists and vice versa. We were able to clean that up. And it ensured that every reported bicycle and pedestrian collision was accurately and appropriately accounted for and used in this report. So we're confident that we've got the most comprehensive data set within this report. This is just what sections of the report there actually are. Again, if you've had the opportunity to review this, table of contents, an introduction, facts at a glance, which are kind of the items that kind of stand out, the different trends that stand out, a total 5-year collision history by mode, the actual data presentation itself. If you went to the report, you'll notice a lot of line graphs, bar charts, and so forth. And we also included maps. And there's an example of the Arizona crash reporting form along with definitions in the back. So broken up in between bicycle and pedestrian collisions, these are the different categories that we vetted. These weren't arbitrary. We looked at the Federal Highway Administration process for these types of collision reporting. And also, obviously, they were on the Arizona crash reporting form. So I think this might help us for opportunities potentially in the future for grants and so forth, following that FHWA report format. And I don't need to read all these. I think there's 14 or 15 different categories: age and gender, light condition, day of week, time of day, month. One of the important things to note here, violation and behavior. Violation is a category that is coded on the reporting form itself that doesn't necessarily correlate to a citation being issued. Same information for pedestrians. One of the different categories that we were able to put together based on reading the narratives and so forth, the pedestrian riding device, whether it be a skateboard or other device, that was coded as a pedestrian collision. So as we get into the map section, these are just excerpts. We broke the city down into North Scottsdale, Central, South, and then Old Town. On the left, that is the 5-year bicycle collisions between 2014 and 18 by severity. And you can kind of see the cluster down near Old Town, simply because of the political and geographic boundaries of the city itself. 11 miles east to west, approximately 33 miles north to south. It can make putting together graphics, more challenging. So that's why we just broke it out the way we did. That way, if you want to zoom in on Old Town or somewhere up in Central Scottsdale, for example, you can do that by looking at the various maps. Worth noting here, the red circles indicate a serious or a fatality, and the blue circles indicate property damage only or non-incapacitating injury. There's also a section in the report, I don't have a slide here, that kind of identifies the hotspots, if you will, for bicycle and pedestrian collisions. So I think that's worth looking at in the draft as well. That's good information for us as practitioners. This here is an example of a slide. It's a trend line for the 5-year bicycle collisions. For vehicle collisions, because we have so many data sets every year, we're able to glean trends from year to year. I don't think it's that way with bicycle and pedestrian collisions, simply because we don't have the number of data sets. And obviously that's a good thing. But from year to year, there can be a significant increase or decrease percentage-wise, as you can see here in this line chart. 88 collisions down to 77 in 2015. But you can see the trend line, generally speaking, is in a downward trend, which is a good thing. Some notable facts on the bike collisions. So 378 bicycle collisions over the 5 years. That's an average of 76 per year. 50 serious injuries with 3 fatalities. Again, remember, this is from 2014 to 2018. Bicycle collisions accounted for 1.7% of all collisions over the 5 years. That includes pedestrians, that includes vehicles. And I'll show you a slide later. You may wonder, how does that compare to other agencies in the Valley? And we'll get to that here momentarily. One of the things that really kind of jumped out at me with these notable facts is the second to last bullet. 4% of bicycle collisions involved a party that was impaired. And you'll see how that compares to pedestrians in just a moment. So this is the 5-year trend of pedestrian collisions, similar line chart. Again, you'll see the blip in 2016 and then back down in 2017, which again would speak to the this data compilation effort maybe being once every 3 years or every 5 years versus every 2 years for our vehicle collision manual. 281 pedestrian collisions over the 5 years, 56 annually. That's less than our bicycle collisions. That was kind of surprising. 63 serious injuries, 19 fatalities, and pedestrian collisions accounted for 1.3% of collisions over the 5 years. Second to last bullet, that was the one that I noted in the bicycle collisions. I think bicycle was 4%, 16% of pedestrian collisions involved a party that was impaired. So 4 times the number. I thought that was an interesting stat. It is important to note at this point in the process of finalizing this document, no definitive conclusions have been drawn or derived from the why these things have occurred. I think that's an important conversation and discussion moving forward. But at this point, this is merely a data compilation effort and getting a final draft so that we can have those conversations moving forward. This is the slide that City of Scottsdale, and I was able to do some comparisons with some sources that I was able to obtain. ADOT, Maricopa County, and Phoenix. Some takeaways from this slide. City of Scottsdale has 8% fewer pedestrian collisions statewide, with almost 50% fewer fatalities. We do have a higher percentage of bicycle collisions compared to the total number, but again, considerably lower fatality rate. And getting to the whys and things. Anecdotally, Scottsdale has a robust trail system. We incorporate bike lanes wherever we can. Whenever there's an opportunity to widen bike lanes, we do. We have a lot of people that use the bicycle mode in Scottsdale. Scottsdale versus Maricopa County, the pedestrian collision rate in Scottsdale is 29% lower. The fatality rate is 47% lower. Again, the bicycle collision rate is higher in Scottsdale, but the fatality rate is 45% lower. And I think that speaks to the robust transportation system that we provide for our bicycle and pedestrian users. City of Phoenix, the bicycle collision rate in Scottsdale is about the same as Phoenix, but the fatality rate is approximately 5% lower. So the pedestrian rate information was unavailable at the time of this presentation. And there are other agencies that publish this information. Mesa is one. And I didn't have the opportunity to compile that information, but I think you see the general trend. Scottsdale overall trends pretty well. So to wrap up my presentation, we want to finalize this report in order to evaluate the health of our transportation system. And as I said earlier, use as a screening tool, identify locations for road safety audits and traffic control device review, assist in identifying locations for possible deployment of other traffic control devices. I mentioned earlier the rapid rectangular flashing beacons, pedestrian hybrid beacons, identify locations and corridors for capital improvement investment, assist with identifying improvements necessary with private development, again, more targeted education and enforcement, influence the design of new facilities. And one example I'll give this subcommittee on that point, about 2 years ago, we partnered with our operations group with our pavement preservation program. And we are able to identify opportunities for either new bike lanes or to create wider bike lanes or separated bike lanes when we have a pavement preservation project going in. A great example is Indian School, just was recently done, where now we have buffered bike lanes as part of that program. And last, to assist with policy decisions. I think having this data at our disposal assists with that effort. And so with that, I'll wrap it up. And if there's any questions, I'll be happy to try to answer those. Thank you.
Thank you, David. This is Chair Anderson. Is there anybody on the committee that has any questions for David at this time?
This is Ted Levy. One quick question. So did you say it has been or has not yet been decided how frequently you'll be doing this report?
I think that's some more internal, I'm sorry, Chair Anderson, subcommittee members. I think that's something that we need to discuss further. And as we go through 2019, 2020 data, we want to make sure there's enough data points to make it useful. Right. Again, this was a very laborious and time-consuming effort. And in order to do it as complete as we have, I'm thinking, and perhaps there's other transportation staff and management on this call that can weigh in as well. But I'm thinking every 3 years, maybe every 5 years.
Right. Thank you.
This is Subcommittee Member Davis. Well, I don't have any questions. David, I just wanted to tell you that this is a very informative presentation. I really appreciate when we make our decisions based on, good data pulls. We've had former commission or subcommittee members in the past, I think, who will be very excited to see this report released, and I look forward to reading it in its entirety when the final copy is put out there. So thank you.
Thank you for that feedback.
David, this is Chair Anderson. I have a question for you on the report, and thank you for your presentation. The summary was very good. I read the report last night, draft, and you hit all the high points, which I thought were very appropriate. One question I have, though, and it's kind of an inquiry, is on the percentage of people in accidents, both pedestrian and bicycles, the 4 and 8% of impairment. Do they make a discern between who was the impaired party? Was it the driver, or was it the pedestrian, or what kind of split was that?
Chair, interesting. Great question. They do discriminate between whether it was the bicyclist or the pedestrian versus the driver. I don't have that breakdown, but I think we have that data. I don't have it at my disposal to answer the question right now. But I do think that that's something that's worth looking into.
And the reason I'm asking the question is the difference between the bicyclist and the pedestrians, and the pedestrians being, as you said, almost 4 times higher. Is it because the pedestrians are probably more of the pedestrians impaired than are the people on the bicycles? That's kind of how I look at it. So it'd be interesting to know.
I would agree with you, Chair Anderson. And again, I think that's something that before I finalize the report, we can take another closer look at. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Any other questions from the committee? If I don't see anybody raise their hand, we'll move on to the next item of the agenda.
Thank you.
Thank you, David. Okay, we're moving on to item number 5, 70th Street Neighborhood Bikeway. And I believe Susan. doing the
Thank you.
presentation.
Thank you. This is Susan Conclu, Senior Transportation Planner. Let me get my, share my screen and get this loaded. Can you see the cover slide?
Yes, I can see it.
Okay, thank you. This is a pretty brief update, but it's been quite a while since we talked about this project with the Paths Trails Subcommittee. The 70th Street Neighborhood Bikeway. This is funded from Maricopa Association of Governments, MAG, through their Design Assistance Program. The consultant team for this includes Harrington Planning and Design as the prime consultants, joined by TY Lin International, as well as Traffic Research and Analysis as their sub-consultants. And the purpose of this is to come up with some preliminary design concepts for the corridor and gather public input. And these are, again, concepts only, not full design. Any additional design or future construction would need to go through additional vetting, receive funding, and include more public input. The project is along a 2.5 mile corridor on 70th Street from the Roosevelt Street Continental Drive down in the south at the Tempe border, all the way up to 2nd Street in Old Town Scottsdale. And this is only within existing city right-of-way. We're not looking at anything outside of that. It's considered a low stress neighborhood route, and it connects a lot of other things, such as the existing bike route along the southern area on Roosevelt Street, the existing bike lanes on Indian School Road in Old Town, as well as the path along the Arizona Canal at the north end, and some upcoming bike lane projects on McDowell Road and Thomas Road. The long-term goals for this include improving bike and pedestrian comfort, consider expanding traffic calming to bring vehicles to the proper speed, provide wayfinding and route signage to help people navigate through that area and that route, some ADA connections and improvements, and really provide biking and walking connections to Old Town Scottsdale from the neighborhood. And taking you to the project segments. Each area is a little bit different, so the consultant team divided the projects into 5 segments, and they're really characterized by how wide the existing right-of-way is in that area, as well as the adjacent types of land use. So starting from south to north, the segment 1 is primarily single family homes in that neighborhood. Segment 2 runs from McDowell to Wilshire Drive, which is just, just south of Thomas Road. Then in segment 3, that's primarily an alley segment that was part of an earlier study several years ago. And from Thomas Road to 4th Street, we start getting into more multifamily development from Thomas up to 4th Street. And then the segment 5, we've just recently changed this alignment. It'll continue going north up to 2nd Street. Before, in the early stages of this study, segment 5 was looking at kind of taking a jog over to 69th and 4th Street up to Main Street. It just didn't end up being feasible. The the team has looked at typical constraints in each segment. This one just zooms in to the one area that would be through the alley. Things they look at are existing utilities, whether or not there are sidewalks, if there are curb ramps or not, any traffic calming that may be there, other things, whether it's related to flood irrigation infrastructure and on-street parking. So we don't need to go into every detail, but it's just to give you an idea of what the consultants have been looking at. Here are some images of those typical constraints, things such as the narrower width of some of these roads with on-street parking doesn't maybe give a lot of space for the bike environment. Also, there could be utility equipment that may limit the concepts that they come up with. No route signage or wayfinding. So if someone doesn't really know that neighborhood, they may not know that it can lead all the way from Tempe to Old Town easily. And then some sidewalk gaps. They did come up with some potential design solutions to consider, such as a conventional bike lane, buffered bike lanes that may or may not have enough room for on-street parking. We're not considering removing parking as part of this. So part of the analysis has really looked at, well, where do we have room to have both of those types of things, as well as sharrows when there's not enough space for any kind of striped bike lane or buffered bike lane. The different off-street options for the alleyway, some things like speed cushions, speed feedback signs, those would need to receive separate approval from the Transportation Commission due to the policy for the neighborhood traffic management program. And then again, things like route signs to help direct people. The public input that we've had so far was a virtual open house from November 17th to the 30th. It included most of the slides you've seen here in a recorded video presentation, as well as a questionnaire. And we did have some pretty high number of responses. We received over 160 responses from people. We did a mailing and did electronic notifications about the public open house so that we could spread the word. Next steps would include reviewing this public input, the further development of the concepts and ideas, an upcoming open house, tentatively probably going to go up for 2 weeks starting next week. And then the team will produce the final report for staff to utilize. And again, from that point, moving forward into the future, any additional design or construction would need to receive additional funding, go through more public outreach, and the future improvements could happen in phases as well. So if you need me to go back to any slides or if you have questions or comments, I'd be happy to answer your questions.
Thank you, Susan. This is Terry Anderson. Very, very informative, presentation.
Thank you.
Good overview. Does anybody on the committee have any questions of Susan on this topic?
Yes, this is Subcommittee Member Davis. Susan, so since we received MAG funding for the design of this, once we've completed and wrapped up that report, is it typical that we will then go back during the MAG cycle for funding construction and maybe some application? I didn't know if it was typical to submit for construction funding for items that they have funded preliminary design of.
Thank you for your question, Chair Anderson, Subcommittee Member Davis. That is one thing that a lot of communities work on, is they do go through the design assistance program to come up with the concepts, and then with a future funding cycle, they apply for transportation alternatives or construction congestion mitigation air quality funding for the construction, and then typically that city funds their remaining design. I've also seen some communities that flip it, where they secure the construction funding, then come back in the future and apply for design assistance funds. Anything, it helps them show a commitment to the project, and that can help them to receive a higher score on their application if the project itself is a good project. I don't think flipping it is the best way. I mean, I think it's better to come up with your concepts, analyze that more, decide how the community wants that project to move forward, if they want it to move forward, and then secure funding for construction. And some just fund it locally as well. There's a mix of options that can be looked at.
Thank you. And then I had one additional question. So, I know that when I go look at our, transportation master plan, we have shared use paths defined as one, one not street designation, but one designation of travel. We have bike routes, and then we have bike lanes. So, I know that Tempe has their master plan for their bike boulevard network. Do we intend to develop a similar, I guess, plan where we would have these bikeways, which are, I would say a step higher from an infrastructure standpoint than just having a bike lane? Do we intend to plan out a network, or is this kind of just a trial run to see how this one section goes, and then we would consider applying it to other, half-mile streets in the city?
Thank you. Good question. I'll let Dave Meinhardt jump in if he wants to expand on that. I'm familiar with your reference on Tempe's bike boulevard map. And then there's different terminology. We were using neighborhood bikeway instead for this one, but if Dave has more he would like to talk about for this question.
Yeah, Dave Meinhardt, Transportation Planning Manager. Thank you, Susan. Chair Anderson, Subcommittee Member Davis. We are just kicking off the development of an update to our transportation master plan. We're going to be referring to it based on conversation with the commission last month as a transportation action plan. The reason for that being that we're really not looking at 30 to 40 years out anymore. We're looking at really the next 5 to 15, 20 years. So we feel we're much more action oriented rather than long range plan oriented. When it comes to the neighborhood bikeways, also referred to as bicycle boulevards, way things have been going in other cities lately around the country, that term bicycle boulevard is kind of falling by the wayside because it doesn't help the marketing of what you're trying to do. It tends to make some community members believe that you're trying to force cars off of a street. So that's why we're using this terminology. And this is our first assessment of a corridor. We have identified other potential corridors for this type of a concept. But the key on the neighborhood bikeway itself is that you're really trying to make the entire street bike friendly, not just a bike lane. And that ties into the type of traffic you have, the type of land uses that are associated with it. And frankly, one of the things we're finding on this particular corridor is that traffic volumes are higher than we were expecting, because this isn't on our half mile and mile grid network, so we don't do counts on these types of streets. And the reality is that the best performing bikeways are usually within 1/4 mile of a major roadway corridor, because people are still trying to access the destinations along that corridor. They're just looking for a more comfortable way to do it. Long story short, we are going to be identifying some other potential segments of roadway within the city as part of our bike element of the updated transportation plan as we go forward, and we'll be providing information to that subcommittee as that happens. The goal is to try to have a plan pretty well in place and reviewed by the end of basically by fall of this year. So we will be visiting with the subcommittee a couple of times as part of that process. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much.
Thank you.
This is Chair Anderson. I got a couple questions. And I'm not sure, I don't remember if you brought this slide up on the screen or not. It was in the handout we had, there was the key routes of the Old Town Scottsdale.
Oh, that's for the next item.
Was that the next item?
Uh-huh. Now, this project will connect up to Old Town
Old
at
Town, okay,
70th
yeah.
Street and 2nd Street. I can go to that map if you
Well,
want.
no, that's fine.
Okay.
I can ask that question at that time. I guess I pushed that in with the next one.
That's okay. I mix them up every now and then too.
Okay, got a couple questions on your routes. One seems interesting is the alley route, the one that's off street.
Mhm.
Has there been any, you had a couple open house, meetings on that. Has there been any pushback from the neighbors who would back up to that route about routing bicyclists through their alleys and through there? I know there might be a privacy issue that people might be concerned about. There was any pushback on that at those meetings?
Thank you, Chair Anderson. In the previous study, we had actual public meetings in person and received a lot of input from the adjacent properties. It was mixed. There were some that were worried about, they're not all the different fences and walls are different heights through that segment. So some people were worried about people coming through there. Some were more worried about maintenance the way it currently is, because they said that the feedback we got was sometimes people come through there and accidentally toss a cigarette and weeds and things caught on fire. So some people were interested in the city adding a route through there so that it would be better maintained. But there was a mix of feedback we got. And then more recently with this current study, there was some feedback. There are a couple of properties there that south of Wilshire that have, there's not a public easement held by the city. So it would probably need to wrap around those as opposed to trying to connect through there. So we did hear from one property owner there that both times that said they were not interested in anything back behind the homes. To point out though that alley is still aligned with the rest of this corridor. It's the only spot. That's why it was a study a few years ago, because it's this little piece on an existing unimproved bike route all the way to Old Town, where if you were going to bypass it, you'd have to wrap up and around and have some kind of crossing or improvement along Thomas and then bring people back to the alignment. So again, future improvements would include more public input, and some neighbors have changed since that earlier study. So we would still want to get more feedback.
So the stretch you said by Wilshire, there's a stretch by Wilshire that there's an alley there, but it's not a public alley. It's what, an easement or utility easement or something like that?
Correct. There's a public utility easement behind three properties there. And I want to say only one of them, there's a little bit of other easement for this type of thing, and then two without. So, and the street itself is
familiar with that type of situation. I live up off of Shea and Scottsdale Road, and we had some horse trails around here that some of them were easements, some of them were actually dedicated, and we had some feedback from some of the neighbors. Didn't like the horseback people riding along the backside of their houses, and so they eventually got the utility easement closed off from horses and pathways through there. So because of that reason.
And you can get a whole mix of concerns or interest anytime you're there.
To try and get everybody on the same page. Second thing is security in those type of areas. It's unlit, it's narrow. When this stuff, do you address security issues on that type of route, or is it just something we have to deal with?
Thank you for that question as well. We look at the different options. Sometimes lighting can be included and other times it's not feasible. So it's kind of early on right now in a concept to really know if that can be considered, but we would look at that. That was included in the previous study for that segment as a possible option. And we have a few other locations where there's pedestrian lighting in an alley type path.
And then one last question. You mentioned the Indian school conversion from 4 lanes to a bicycle friendly route. Since that's been done, which I think it's getting close to a year now, I believe, has there been positive or negative feedback from people along that route, traffic liking it or liking it?
I think Dave has received some feedback since that was striped differently for a portion of Indian School, from a standard bike lane, you mean to the buffered?
Yeah, to the
Buffered,
buffered bike
okay.
lane, making it a
Yeah.
bicycle friendly route from a city.
Yeah,
Yeah.
as far as I know, it's been positive feedback.
Dave Meinhardt here. Chair Anderson, Susan's correct. The reality is we have not received very much direct feedback. A couple of folks have commented that they're happy to see it. One person had questioned our sanity, responded back, and then they didn't get any additional questions. It's just, that improvement it's just been in place actually for about 3 or 4 months, but we have been doing buffered bike lanes in other parts of the city over the last few years where those have been usually where we've eliminated a center turn lane on a low volume collector road. And as is usually the case in what we do, we tend to hear from the people who are concerned on what we did. And again, I'm only aware of one person who's questioned what we've done on any of these segments. And usually when people are happy, they don't talk to us. But I take silence as positive when, with the things that we do, and we're changing the configuration of these roadways, because certainly people are more than willing to share their opinions when they're not pleased. But so I would say they've been very successful. Thank you.
Thank
Thank you.
you.
Thank you.
This is Ted Levy. I did have one other question about the alley segment, and I guess it was about coordination. I don't know if we've run many paths through alleys before, but I know oftentimes they're used for trash and bulk trash pickup. Is that something we're coordinating with? Would that have to be changed if we were running a path through there?
Chair Anderson, Subcommittee Member Levy, thank you for that question. This particular location does not include, it's curbside in that neighborhood, but
Okay.
if we were doing this in other locations, as we've done, we would coordinate that and look into all of that. This one has a private irrigation ditch, partially, part of it's piped, part of it's open. It carries SRP irrigation, but it's not owned and operated by SRP. It's maintained by the adjacent property owners. So it's a little different than what someone might see in other neighborhoods that have irrigation.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Susan, this is Chair Anderson. Irrigation is active.
Correct, it is active.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions from committee members? If I don't see any hands, we'll move on down the road. We'll move on to item number 6, the Old Town Bicycle Master Plan.
All right.
Susan, we get to you again.
Thank you. If you could see my new cover slide, let me know.
Yes, we can.
Okay, thank you. The Old Town Bicycle Master Plan is also funded through a similar program of the Maricopa Association of Governments. This one happens to require a 20% match by the city of Scottsdale. And the year we applied was the final year that type of program funding was available. So we were very excited to be selected. Y2K Engineering is the heading up the consultant team, along with Harrington Planning Design, Engineering, Mapping Solutions, and Work Urban Design. Overall, Scottsdale is very bicycle friendly. However, the Old Town area has different gaps and barriers to bicycling. And this bicycle master plan will aim to identify options and make recommendations to address these gaps into and through downtown for bicyclists. We do have a lot of connections, as you'll see on some of the other slides, but our goal is really identify these opportunities, make future improvements, and increase biking. The master plan does focus on, there's already 10 districts within Old Town that the Old Town Scottsdale character area plan identifies. This study looks at evaluating the bike infrastructure without, throughout Old Town as a whole, but also between these districts to look at possible prioritized routes. The project schedule, it takes about a year to complete this kind of master plan. There was the official kickoff at the beginning of April, and there was some data collection prior to that. A visioning workshop was held with city staff back in May with the plan to have public outreach begin after that. Due to COVID-19, we did have to make some adjustments for all types of city meetings, as we've all seen. So summertime was kind of spent by the team to analyze the data and start drafting the master plan and preparing public involvement, which started in the fall instead. And the plan will tentatively finish in March or possibly April. The visioning workshop that was held with staff included over 20 city staff bringing their areas of expertise and their observations about biking in Old Town. And this included people from the planning department, traffic engineering, economic development, tourism and special events, and community services. It was held as a virtual meeting to identify the existing conditions, what the staff members feel are the opportunities as well as barriers to biking in Old Town. Data-wise, this plan is looking at a lot of different data to start with. The team collected multimodal volumes on Wednesday, March 4th at 10 major intersections in Old Town. We're very glad that this was collected a little early, since we did not know that things would change so drastically beginning later in March, where everything changed with even where people were traveling and how many people were biking, walking, using scooters, or even driving. So this happened on a non-spring training game day. And this gives the team some good information about the usage in Old Town for non-motorized users. The highest counts taken at that time were at Scottsdale and Camelback, and Scottsdale and 2nd Street. And there was also a high number at 68th Street and Indian School, which also runs along the Arizona Canal. The team looks at existing bike infrastructure. So the solid orange line shows existing paths. The solid dark blue line shows the bike lanes, and then the dashed lines represent planned projects that are already in the works. And then they also looked at existing crossings like any tunnels, underpasses, pedestrian refuges, that type of crossing. A gap analysis was done looking at, if you see the solid orange lines, these are paths, but they're also regionally significant because they connect to other cities. So the Arizona Canal Path connects to Phoenix, the Crosscut Canal Path, it's not labeled there, but that's the north-south one right here, that connects down to Tempe, and Indian Bend Wash Path also connects down to Tempe. Those are important. They also looked at key access points along the boundary of Old Town. So if you see these little bike dots on the map, they looked at all of those areas. And these look at connections into and out of Old Town. This gap analysis has looked at spots and corridors shown in orange that could become future improvements. And this also looks at things like sometimes a bike lane goes along a segment but then drops at that intersection right before, or there are just things at an intersection that may need spot improvements. We and the team also know that there's a need for both north-south connectivity and east-west connectivity, especially to create low stress routes for a wide range of bike users. From there, the team has identified key routes for further analysis that make great connections. So at this south portion would be 2nd Street, connecting Indian Bend Wash Path all the way through Old Town to the Crosscut Canal, as well as part of the Arizona Canal. The next one from there, east-west, it utilizes Glen Rosa Street, right at a connection to the Indian Bend Wash Path, Montecito Avenue, 6th Avenue, Stetson Drive, and 5th Avenue. That to me, that's one that's a good example where when you don't have route signage or wayfinding signage and you're using more than one street to enhance a route, that signage is really important to help guide people. 75th Street from 2nd Street to Camelback Road, that connects the 2nd Street path that already exists, parts of Civic Center up to Camelback. 70th Street, which we had in the previous presentation down here in the corner, and Marshall Way connecting from Osborne up to Camelback. And then up at the very north, the key route is Chaparral Road and Rancho Vista from 64th Street to the Arizona Canal. And these may continue to be refined a little bit as they move forward. The virtual open house that was recently held was December 15th to January 5th. It also included many of these slides you saw with a little bit more detail and recorded audio. There was also a questionnaire for this open house and they received 79 responses. Interestingly, there was an option to write in additional comments. We received several from people who would really like to see better biking in North Scottsdale, even though this was for Old Town, but it's good feedback. The next steps include evaluating the public input further, looking at corridor and spot projects within the key routes that we saw on the previous slide, and then prioritizing recommended projects in the plan, continue drafting the plan, and having an upcoming second virtual open house, probably around the end of February, beginning of March, and then the team will finalize the master plan, the bicycle master plan. And then as Dave talked earlier about the upcoming transportation action plan or transportation master plan update, that will also look at what comes from this Old Town bicycle master plan so that everything is well coordinated. And I can take questions or comments and go, if you need to go back to a particular slide, please let me know.
Mr. Chair Anderson, any questions from the committee members? Okay, Susan, I have a quick one on that the slide. I don't think I saw it come up, but it was in the packet. It's the key routes, Old Town.
Okay.
It's not that one. It's very similar to that one. I wonder if it had a dashed red line along that route you're talking about that zigzagged going east-west.
Oh, okay. Is it this gap analysis one that has the dashed, or?
No, not that one. I understand that one. It's this one.
This one.
That
Okay.
has it. It must have been on one of the slides. That alignment right there showed up dash on 2 exhibits, and I wasn't sure what it meant because it wasn't in the legend.
Oh, I'm sorry. I must have translated something different when we made the PDF. There were additional slides with this one, if we were going to go into more detail, where as we clicked through, the one we were talking about showed up as dashed just so you could identify
Gotcha.
on this map. I want to shorten it for today, so that may have happened after you received your packet, but there's not any different alignment or anything that would have been
Okay.
shown there. Thank you.
Because I wasn't sure, so I understand.
Thank you for asking.
Thank you too. Very, very informative. Again, any questions from any of the rest of the committee members? Well, thank you. Two very nice presentations. We appreciate that. Moving on to the next item, other transportation projects and program status.
All right. Thank you. Greg Davies is going to join for a few of these slides, but we just have a short update for you. So Greg, just let me know when you need me to click through.
Okay, thanks, Susan. Good morning, Chair Anderson and members of the Paths Trails Subcommittee. I'm Greg Davies. I'm Senior Transportation Planner with the City of Scottsdale, and today I'm going to give you a brief update of one trail rehabilitation project, and then a trail maintenance project, and then two new construction trail projects. I guess I'm the trail guy. So I'll talk about trails, which is a very interesting mode that we have. As we discussed earlier on in previous presentations, these trails wind their way through neighborhoods. A lot of times they're along arterial roadways, but most of the time we consider them neighborhood trails. The screen shows the Sundowns Garden Equestrian Trail, and this was a trail rehabilitation project. This came about due to a concern with the oleanders that presented a health risk to horses. Actually, oleanders are poisonous. And in regards to that complaint, we addressed it, and this case was in mitigation, or actually litigation, and we mitigated it through this project using the Trail Improvement Program funds. This trail is in, again, the Sundown Gardens neighborhood, which is in the vicinity of Miller and Cactus Road. Miller, which is 76th Street. This neighborhood was platted back in 1970. And there's no sidewalks, like many neighborhoods within the city of Scottsdale, but there are several easements that wind their way through the neighborhood, and these people that adjoin these easements and the residents use these as for equestrian uses and for walking and sometimes mountain biking. As you see in the picture on the left side of the screen, there's an equestrian, and those oleanders were there. Last week, we completed the project and mitigated that and took out the oleanders, and now you see a nice smooth trail, and there is no actually impedance regarding the navigation of the trail. And actually, based on our ordinance, you're not allowed to plant vegetation within the easement. This is a long story. I'm not going to go into it, but that is the requirement of the Code of Ordinances. You cannot plant vegetation within easements. You cannot obstruct easements. You can't fence off easements, but it happens a lot. And you'd be surprised. And as Chair Anderson said, lots of people like them. Lots of people don't really favor movement behind their wall or their fence. So that's this project. It was a success, and we're done, and we will move on to our next one as needed. Okay, Susan, you can go to the next slide. This is a trail maintenance project, and it's fortuitous because Susan's going to talk about our trail maintenance endeavors soon. But this is a Hayden Trail rebuild. This trail is on the east side of Hayden Road between Dynamite and Via Donna. Very primitive trail at this point in time. As you can see the photos on the left, it's barely visible. It is used. There's some portions of it that cannot be used due to the over vegetation and specific growth that has taken place. As you can see on the right, that is a newly constructed trail. That actually is the firehouse trail we constructed just last year. And that's what a new trail actually looks like. But what we're going to try to do is make the Hayden Trail very similar and kind of recreate the tread, re-sign the trail for the neighborhood, and then that'll provide a little bit more comfortability for the residents to use the trail. It's a lot of equestrians in this area, and it connects to the Via Donna Trail, which was built around 2007. And the Via Donna Trail runs east and west from Scottsdale Road to Pima Road, a very highly used trail. So that's the Hayden Trail rebuild. This will take place probably by the end of this month. I'm working with the contractor on that. He's going to give me an estimate, and we're getting very close to making this happen. Okay, Susan, next slide.
Sorry, I was clicking and clicking. Something was wrong. Thank you.
Okay. All right. These are our two new trail construction projects, brand new trails. This graphic shows you the location of these trails in northern Scottsdale. As you can see, based on this map, those dashed lines, those are planned trails. And that is pretty conducive to the type of topography that's out there. Very large parcels. There's no sidewalks. There are room for trails within the right of way, and there's dedicated easements. Let me first talk about the Pinnacle Vista Trail, which is more or less on the western side of Scottsdale, and that little pop out. That trail is on Pinnacle Vista Drive, and it is from 56th Street to 62nd Street. There is an existing trail from 62nd Street to Scottsdale Road already. It's interesting, as I had mentioned earlier, a lot of these neighborhoods don't have sidewalks, so the pedestrian access route is the roadway or an unpaved trail. And if there's a sidewalk, they can use a sidewalk. But this neighborhood is interesting because it's all navigated via unpaved trails. Children go to the school, they use the trails to go to their schools. This is really important because this new trail will connect to the Sonoran Trail School Complex, which is actually in the city of Phoenix, but the children live actually in Scottsdale in that residential area. This will be a 6-foot trail, very similar to the trail picture I showed you that showed a new build. It'll utilize a trail easement that's existing and also the existing right of way. So it'll help not only the people in the neighborhood to walk more comfortably, but it'll provide good access to the Sonoran Trail School Complex. The other trail is the Ranch Gate Trail. This is a very interesting area too, because there is a lot of residential, obviously, again, no sidewalks in the vicinity of Ranch Gate. But this trail is a connecting point to the Tom's Trail access point, which is the Tom's Thumb Trailhead. It's a large preserved trailhead that is at the south end of 128th Street. In regards to this trail, we've lots of people that are in the neighborhood actually use the roadway to walk east and west. And so this trail became a priority based on just the comfortability and the safety. This trail will go from 120th Street alignment to 128th Street. The segment from 118th Street to the 120th Street alignment has been stipulated to be built by a developer. And then there is a trail that's going to go along the west side of 128th Street, which will be built by a developer, which is occurring at this point in time. That roadway of 128th Street is actually being built. It should be almost done, and that'll connect to the Tom's Thumb Trailhead. This is about a 4-foot wide trail. We are kind of constrained on our right-of-way. It'll be all in the right-of-way. We feel it's important to be at this location, as I mentioned, just for comfortability and safety, and it'll be on the south side of Ranch Gate Road. These two trail projects, obviously, we're going to go out to the public. Our plan is to go out hopefully within a week to do a virtual public meeting. It'll be a 15-day duration. There'll be maps. There'll be a narrated PowerPoint that I give discussing specifics about these two trails, and then showing some graphics, some plan level design, showing the alignments that the public can access and review. And then we'll receive those comments. If they feel favorable to these trails, we'll move forward. I don't see, there'll be obviously some people that have concerns. That's okay. Hopefully we'll be able to address those and move forward with the construction. We plan on constructing these trails probably in the April of 2021 timeframe. So it's pretty imminent. It's going to happen soon, not too long after the Hayden Trail rebuild. So that kind of culminates my update on the trail program.
Thank you. Staff are currently working on a trail maintenance outreach plan to inform the public on trail maintenance responsibilities. We will bring a full item to the Path and Trails Subcommittee in April about this, but we just wanted to give you kind of a teaser about it. Some of this came from a public inquiry as well as internal discussions. The proposed CIP funding for Indian Bend Wash Path renovation. There are 4 sections that were identified that they're all 8 feet wide currently with poor surface conditions and cracking. And these are higher activity areas and more straightforward construction than other areas that we realize more segments need renovating, but these were the first 4 to be identified. And then Dave, if you would like to give your newest update on that, or I can summarize it.
Thank you, Susan. Yes, where we are, as Susan mentioned, these are our 4 segments identified as as what we've referred to as a phase 1 of path renovation. Because over time, obviously, the pavement doesn't last forever, and there are needs to not only replace pavement but add width. But the good news is that with right now where our budget office's revenue streams or forecasts are going, this project has been included on the list of recommended projects for the new 5-year CIP. Don't have the years for programming quite yet, but the good news is that it did make it into the proposed CIP, and really happy to see that this project is on track at least to move forward. There still needs to be review done through the city council process on this, but very good news.
Thank you. Great work. A scooter ordinance update. Mark Melnichenko presented an update to the city council on January 19th. This included proposed updates to the city code relating to bicycles, e-bikes, and electric scooters, as well as introducing a draft ordinance on licensing for shared device providers to get feedback on what could happen with a future license. City council unanimously approved tabling any action on this item during that meeting so that staff could return in the future with changes. There was feedback primarily about proposed parking restrictions for scooters, as well as sidewalk riding within portions of Old Town, as well as some other feedback that city council members gave. So staff are gathering more information and also looking into further development of the draft licensing ordinance, since we were given comments on that. And we will have updates in the future as we move forward with some of those changes. Traffic engineering and street operations are currently looking at putting high visibility crosswalks at 7 locations along the Pima shared use path, as well as the bike route. Some of the areas, if you're not familiar with this path, it kind of dips in and out of the neighborhood walls along 87th Terrace, but it is a continuous route that's either path or on street. These cross streets, as you can imagine, have normal traffic, and so adding these high visibility crosswalks should help. Here's another image showing kind of the difference in how it brings more attention to people crossing there, walking and biking.
If I could jump in real quick.
Oh, please do.
Just confirming all locations have been installed.
Oh, okay. Sorry about that. So That's the good news. It's not coming up. That's already done. Look how quick
Yep.
we were able to do that. Thank you. And those also help reduce turning conflicts. Also, a quick update if you haven't heard that a high intensity activated crosswalk or pedestrian hybrid beacon was installed on Scottsdale Road at Palm Lane. There was a pedestrian fatality in January 2019 at this area, at this location, when an elderly resident was crossing to the bus stop. There are a lot of things on both sides of Scottsdale Road here, destinations, as well as there's residential east and west of Scottsdale Road through here. So that there was some in lieu payment made by a developer on the northeast corner that helped pay for part of this crossing. And then traffic engineering also were able to get a grant from Maricopa Association Governments through their roadway safety program for $180,000 for the study and improvement.
Susan, can I chime in?
Please do.
This is Greg Davies. The pedestrian hybrid beacon or HAWK, high intensity activated crosswalk at McCormick Railroad Park. The mast arms are up and the signal heads are up, but it's not completed yet, but it's very close. And that's on Indian Bend right there at the McCormick Railroad
Similar.
Park.
Okay,
Very similar.
thank you. And I also want to point out that traffic engineering has worked toward developing. They did a study of these types of crossings throughout the city and identifying other locations. So they've done a lot of work toward these improvements, and it's appreciated by the planning staff. Also, just really quick, in the interest of time, I'll skip quickly, but there have been some recent pedestrian signals that give audible options for people who have vision impairments. One, they worked through this with a resident whose family member is near Scottsdale, or this is at Scottsdale and McDonald Drive. It will either, when you tap on the arrow, it says to either wait or cross when it's time to cross at the signal. So this helps. You can also, excuse me. They also have a message that people can hear if they push and hold the button. It'll say wait to cross Scottsdale Road, or the walk signal is on. So that gives a lot more information than some of the older style push buttons that maybe just make a chirping sound or a beep. Sidewalk replacement along the west side of Hayden Road, north of Roosevelt Street. This was just done recently this fall across just the driveway where St. Daniel the Prophet Catholic Church happens to be. Before that, people had to go out into the road or find some other way up and over this median at the driveway. And it's just important to remember that this is a 6-lane arterial with 45-mile-per-hour posted speed limits, where people were having to do this when they would use the sidewalk there. So here's some pictures during the work to cut and pull that median back, and then add improved ramps, better surface there. And lastly, with the Indian School Road repaving project, it is now complete from when we added those buffered bike lanes from 64th Street to Marshall Way. And there's new stamped asphalt. Some of the existing brick that was a good surface was repainted to match. Some of the old crossings there used to have pavers and some metal edging. So what's there now is a much improved surface. And that concludes our updates.
Thank you, Anderson and Greg.
Thank you.
Back when you were the push button on the crosswalks, the one that gives you directions.
Yes.
About a year ago, we had questions in the transmission about pedestrian sensing crosswalk, where you didn't have to touch anything and it sensed you were there wanting to go across. Does anything installed on those or anything further done on those?
I can find out more. I think I remember the one that you're talking about, but we can get more information on that one.
I know they were talking about installing one or planning to install one, I believe off of Shea.
Shay, yeah.
70th Street, someplace in that neighborhood. And
Okay.
I just haven't heard anything to know if it ever was done.
Okay, so we can get an update for you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Does anybody else on the committee have any questions? I guess not. Well, thank you, Susan. Thank you, Dave.
Thank you.
Moving on to identification of future agenda items. Does anybody on the committee have any agenda item they'd like to see coming up or something they want to move up that the staff could work on?
This is Subcommittee Member Davis. I haven't looked at that attachment to see what we have planned, but we've made mention several times during this meeting about an update to the Transportation Master Plan of some sort. Will we get a presentation, I guess, prior to that being moved forward? And if
I'll just
not,
state my heart. Chair Anderson, Subcommittee Member Davis, yes, we will be looking to provide a presentation where we are in that process at your next meeting. We'll probably give you something with more definition to look at for in your following meeting, I guess. So we would be looking at March, then May. But we would certainly like your feedback as we move into that process and before anything is finalized, having the subcommittee's input into the appropriate elements of that plan. Thank you.
thank you.
Thank you.
So this is Chair Anderson. So you're talking having a presentation at our April meeting?
Chair, sorry, I forgot we just moved into February. I was thinking we were still in January for some crazy reason, but yes, so it'll be at your April and your June meetings.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Anything else from any announcements or anything from the committee meeting members?
This is Susan. We may bring you a future item related to the or discussion related to what day this group meets. But we don't know yet if we'll be adding that. Just wanted to give you the heads up.
Are we looking at changing the schedule or trying to facilitate other people, or is that what we're doing?
It would be related to the commissioner that had a time conflict for this, but we would want input from the group, and it may be possible that someone else from the Transportation Commission would end up serving on this subcommittee and keeping the date the way we have it, or the day of the week and time of the month.
Okay.
Thank you.
No other comments or other items, then I'll entertain a motion to adjourn this meeting.
This is Subcommittee Member Davis. So moved.
Ted Levy, second.
All in favor?
Yes.
Aye. Opposed? It's unanimous. Thank you, everybody, for attending, and we will see you in a couple.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.